All right, today we are diving deep into your gut's control panel. We're going to look at the incredible science behind the medicines that handle everything from nausea to, the speed of your digestion. It's really a story about a powerful conversation that's happening inside your body right now.
So let's just kick things off with a question. Have you ever seen something, or maybe even just thought about something, that made your stomach totally churn? Yeah, that immediate physical feeling, that's a perfect example of one of the most powerful connections in your body. And it's right at the heart of what we're talking about today.
You see, it turns out your gut and your brain are constantly talking to each other. I mean, nonstop. They're linked by this complex superhighway of nerves and chemical signals, which forms this amazing gut-brain communication network. This network is basically the control panel for so many of your digestive functions, from feeling hungry to, that feeling of being sick.
And this map kind of shows us how that whole communication system works. Deep down in your brainstem, you've got what you can think of as a vomiting command center. And just look at how it gets distress signals from all over the place. From your inner ear, which handles balance, directly from the stomach itself, and even from a little sensor that's checking your blood for anything nasty. So what happens when this command center gets an urgent message? Well, it kicks off the vomiting reflex. And this is a super coordinated and, let's be honest, pretty dramatic protective mechanism. It is literally your body's way of hitting the emergency eject button to get rid of something it thinks is harmful. So how exactly are these emergency messages delivered? Well, they use these things called neurotransmitters, which are basically chemical messengers. You can think of them as different types of alert codes, one for motion, another one for toxins, and so on. Now, this is the really crucial part. If we can figure out which messenger is sending the alarm, we can figure out how to block it. And check this out. This is basically the master blueprint of the whole system. It's brilliant. You can see how all these different triggers all funnel into what's called the emetic center. Over on the left, you've got signals about motion coming from your inner ear. From the bottom, you've got alerts about toxins in your blood or irritants in your stomach. And get this, even from the top, you have signals from higher brain centers, things related to memory, fear, even just anticipation. It is an incredibly complex defense system. So, if we know all the pathways and we know all the messengers, we can get really smart about how we step in. Modern medicine isn't about just blindly treating the symptom anymore. It's about taking a really targeted approach to stop that problem signal right at its source. Let's start with a classic example, something a lot of us have definitely experienced: motion sickness. You're in a car, on a boat, whatever, and all of a sudden that awful, queasy feeling just starts to creep in. So what is actually going on inside your body? Okay, let's go back to our blueprint and trace this thing. It all starts in the inner ear. When there's a mismatch between what your eyes are seeing and what your inner ear is feeling, an alarm signal gets sent straight to the emetic center. And as you can see right here, it travels along two very specific pathways. One uses histamine and the other uses acetylcholine. So the solution is actually pretty clever. You just block those specific messages. Drugs known as H1 and muscarinic antagonists. You might know them by their brand names. They act like roadblocks. They literally get in the way and block the receptors for histamine and acetylcholine. So that distress signal from your inner ear, it never even reaches the brain's command center. It's a beautifully precise fix.
Okay, now for a much bigger, much more serious challenge. One of the absolute worst side effects for cancer patients is the severe nausea and vomiting that's caused by chemotherapy. Now, this isn't from some confusing motion signals. This is a direct result of the treatment itself, which makes it way, way harder to control.
What's going on here is basically a two-pronged attack. As this diagram shows, the chemo drugs first damage cells in the gut lining. When those cells get damaged, they release a flood of the neurotransmitter serotonin. That's the peripheral pathway, and it causes nausea almost immediately. But that's not all. The drugs also act directly on the brain's trigger zone using a different messenger called substance P. That's the slower central pathway, and it can cause delayed nausea for days. So to fight a two-pronged attack, you need a dual-action defense. Doctors combine two different types of drugs. First up, you have 5-HT3 antagonist to block that immediate serotonin signal coming from the gut. And then, at the same time, you use NK1 antagonist to block the delayed substance P signal up in the brain. It's this really sophisticated 1-2 punch that intercepts both alarms before they can cause a problem.
So, we've seen how to control the eject button, but that is not the only thing our gut's control panel is in charge of. It also sets the speed of our digestion, what's known as motility.
And, sometimes that speed can be set way too slow or way too fast.
First, let's look at the problem when the system is moving just too slowly, which, yeah, we all know as constipation. What's happening is that the natural rhythmic contractions of the intestines, that's called peristalsis, they've slowed right down, and it's causing a major traffic jam. To get things moving again, there are basically four main ways to hit the gas. You've got bulk-forming agents, which just add volume to naturally encourage movement. Then there are stimulants, which are more direct. They literally poke the intestinal nerves to get them going. You also have osmotics, which cleverly draw more water into the bowel to soften everything up. And finally, lubricants, which just help ease the passage. It's really about picking the right tool for the job. All right, now let's flip it and talk about the complete opposite problem when your digestive system is stuck in overdrive. In cases of diarrhea, that peristalsis is happening way, way too fast, which means there just isn't enough time for water to be absorbed back into the body. So the solution here is to gently pump the brakes. Drugs like loperamide, which is actually a type of opioid that only works on the gut, they calm down those hyperactive nerves in the intestinal wall. This slows down the contractions, and that gives the body the time it needs to absorb water properly. But, and this is a really, really critical safety point, these drugs should never be used if the diarrhea is caused by an infection, because you absolutely do not want to trap those bad bacteria inside. So, as we've seen across all these different examples, whether it's nausea or motility, the story of modern gastrointestinal medicine is really a story of precision. We've gone from using kind of blunt instruments to having these highly specialized, targeted tools. And this really is the whole point. The goal isn't just to stop a symptom anymore, like vomiting. It's to identify and then intercept the exact biological signal that's causing the problem in the first place. By creating drugs that target single specific receptors, like 5-HT3 for serotonin or NK1 for substance P, we end up with treatments that are just way more effective and have far fewer unwanted side effects. Which brings us to one last pretty fascinating thought. We started all this by talking about how a thought can make you physically sick. So as our understanding of this super intricate gut-brain axis gets better and better, it kind of begs the question, could the next generation of treatments that we design for our stomachs also end up having profound benefits for our minds? It's a powerful idea to think about. Thanks for tuning in.